That get all your attention? We like to start, it's the way we intend to go on. Good afternoon, everyone. That was just a little graphic that was done by our departmental comms to highlight Proni 100. So you're all very welcome, both online and here in the room at the Public Record Office. My name is David Huddleston, and I'm the Acting Director of the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland, or Proni as it's more usually called. I also perform the role of Deputy Keeper of the Records of Northern Ireland as set out in the 1923 Public Records Act. I'm delighted to welcome Mrs. Patricia Corbett, Deputy Lieutenant of Belfast, and Colin Boyle, Permanent Secretary of the Department for Communities. And I extend a warm welcome to all of those of you who have been to Proni before, and especially those visiting Proni for the first time. And if this is your first visit, I hope it will be the first of many. Proni is part of the Northern Ireland Civil Service and belongs to the Engaged Communities Group within the Department for Communities. And the department is currently the keeper of the records and has responsibility for the archives and records which Proni cares for as the official archive for Northern Ireland. Proni is a memory organisation, and we regard the archives entrusted to us as a rich, complex, and fragile heritage. Proni's past 100 years has relied on a dedicated staff, public-spirited depositors, supportive public record bodies, and a varied community of users to shape the organisation you see today. I express my sincere thanks for the contribution of a wide range of individuals, families, and organisations to making Proni's story, and some of whom are represented here today. Today's event is entitled Proni 100, Celebrating a Century, and includes a keynote and panel discussion to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Northern Ireland Public Records Act becoming law. It offers a range of perspectives on Proni state records and private records, and reflects on the experiences of panel members as they've interacted with archives. It is also one of the flagship events in the programme marking the centenary of Proni and connecting with new audiences. And as part of this, we were delighted that Joe Kennedy, the US Special Envoy to Northern Ireland, could join us recently to open the US Declaration of Independence exhibition. As we consider Proni's past, present, and future, I hope this afternoon's event will provide food for thought as we mark the 100th anniversary of Proni and the Public Records Act. On behalf of the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland and the Department for Communities, I want to express my thanks to our keynote speaker, Tim McGarry, our panelists, our chair, and other contributors. And this is where I get to the housekeeping bit. Before I hand over to the speakers this afternoon, can I just ask, as a courtesy, if you check that your mobile phones are switched off or set to silent. And there is no planned fire alarm, so if the alarm sounds, we will go back out through the main exit through the front of the building, and our assembly point is across the Queen's Road. I'm just conscious there's quite a few people to take seats. If you want to come on up, there's seats up at the front here. I'm now delighted to introduce Colin Boyle, the Permanent Secretary of the Department for Communities. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, David. I'm absolutely delighted to be here to mark the centenary of Proni. It's a great occasion to be here. And actually, one thing I just would like to say before I sort of properly get into the speech is, I've been here a few times, and every time I come here, I get really warm welcome. Whether I was a permanent secretary or not, I always get a warm welcome. And I've seen agility, flexibility, innovation, customer focus from the staff who work here. And that ability to turn a lot of information and a lot of archives in a very, very accessible way for the use of so many people in such a fantastic way. And I just want to say thank you to the staff who actually don't do a job. It's a passion and it's like a vocation for them. So I just want to say thank you very, very publicly for that. So Proni, established 100 years ago today by the passing of the Public Records Act in 1923, in the aftermath of the destruction of the Public Record Office of Ireland in Dublin on 30th of June 1922. The Dublin office had been consumed by fire during the Irish Civil War, resulting in the catastrophic loss of 7 centuries of Irish records. Over the next century, Proni would amass more than 3 million records that constitutes the community memory of all of our citizens. Proni is a key heritage asset that is valued by VFC and which is responsibility for its stunning, iconic building and its contents. So as I said earlier, I've been very fortunate to have had a behind the scenes tour, which I found not just fascinating, but totally absorbing. And I would recommend it to anyone who hasn't had the opportunity. So in keeping with my department's common purpose of supporting people, building communities and shaping places, I would like to reflect on how Proni has contributed to these goals, focusing on 3 key priorities. And don't worry, I won't get carried away. I won't take 15 minutes in doing this either. So we'll move through this quickly. So the first one, diversity, inclusion, and equality. Proni records are not just the records of government or the great and the good. The range of collections reflects the many diverse communities and extraordinary individuals that make up our society. Proni's recent outreach programs and activities focused on minority, ethnic, and underrepresented communities that do not traditionally engage with these activities. This has resulted in exhibitions, talks, events, celebrating the important contribution of members from the LGBT community, people with disabilities, and women to our society, both in past and present. And this work is really important in contributing to the department's commitment to embracing diversity and inclusion. Secondly, in terms of partnerships and collaboration, since it's moved here to Titanic Quarter, Proni has continually sought out opportunities for collaboration with partners across culture, arts, heritage, including libraries, museums, and other cultural institutions. Proni also works with partners across central and local government, voluntary community groups, and the education sector. Recent achievements include 2 of Proni's most successful engagement programs. The first was the Piece 4 supported Making the Future project in partnership with the Nerve Centre, National Museums, and the Linen Hall Library, which delivered 30 community engagement programs with over 600 community participants, who in turn created more than 60 creative outputs, which is some going. The second project was the Natural Heritage Lottery Fund supported Collab Archive. That was another partnership with the Nerve Centre. It developed a sustainable model of volunteering engagement using creativity and digital technology. And these projects demonstrate the true value of collaboration and partnership in making a real difference to people's lives. And thirdly, putting the user first, which I mentioned earlier. Proni's records are your records, and Proni always seeks to put the user first. Throughout the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, Proni made considerable efforts to ensure the archives remained accessible to all. Digital initiatives were rolled out to engage and support users online, which helped combat isolation and promote positive mental health. These included the Stay at Home Memories project, which comprised personal accounts of individual experiences during lockdown. And I would like to congratulate Proni for its foresight and its work in capturing these important exercises and experiences during very challenging times. These memories will now form part of the archive and are preserved for future generations. It'll be pretty fascinating to look back in 100 years at those. Turning to other key areas, Proni also made and continues to make an important contribution to redress initiatives in our society by making critical records available to support the Historical Institutional Abuse Redress Scheme and the Troubles Permanent Disablement Payment Scheme. Throughout the lockdowns, Proni colleagues continue to undertake this vital work, both on and off site, to ensure the needs of victims and survivors continue to be met. Really worthy and crucial work. So in conclusion, it's easy to think of archives as dusty, inaccessible records, languishing on shelves in darkened storerooms. But the work of Proni clearly demonstrates the relevance and dynamic impact of archives in our society and how it is able to deliver greater public value for absolutely every one of us. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the commitment, enthusiasm, and passion of everyone in Proni that makes this important work possible. a vocation, not a job. Finally, I look forward to listening to this afternoon's speakers and to their reflections, and I wish Proni continued success in the next century. It's now my pleasure to welcome someone that we're all very familiar with, Mr. Tim McGarry.
Thank you very much, Colin. Thanks for whipping the audience up in the coma there for me. I'm only slagging. Good evening, or good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming out on such a beautiful, beautiful day. I was dandering across there wearing my sunglasses earlier on, and I was going to put them back on when I saw a Sam McBride shirt there. For those who don't know, my name is Tim McGarry. Please, no photographs. I don't want the brew knowing I'm here. My name is Tim McGarry, actor, writer, and Love Island reject. It's an absolute, can I just say what an honour and privilege it is for you to have me here tonight, because David and Con, they were organising this gig a couple of months ago, and they wanted a keynote speaker, and they hired Philip Schofield. Turns out that I am now, well, he's a lot cheaper than I am. Well, he is now. Anyway, and I don't like to bring up the distasteful subject of money, but I have been paid, and I've been paid in advance, which is quite a big mistake. I've been paid in advance before I've done any work. So, like a DUP MLA, I've got my money, so due. I'm away home. No, looking around the room, I see a lot of very important and distinguished people. Couldn't make it. But I'm delighted to be here for Proni, because I'm an old fella. You know, it doesn't look like it, but I am an old fella. I'm so old I can remember when Gerry Adams genuinely wasn't in the row. And a lot of people don't know this. I used to be a lawyer back in the old days. I'm actually, I keep telling people I'm actually Northern Ireland's equivalent to the Ukrainian president, Vladimir Zelensky. Yeah, we're both very, very similar. He used to be a lawyer. I used to be a lawyer. He became a comedian. I became a comedian. He had his own sitcom on Ukrainian TV. I had my own sitcom on Northern Ireland TV. He's a superb war leader, and I'm from North Belfast. But when I was a lawyer, I had my first encounter with the Public Records Office way back in Balmoral Avenue. We all remember those days, ladies and gentlemen. And as Colin has said, and I want to say this in the nicest way I possibly can, things have improved. Genuinely have improved, and it's superb, the facilities that you have here. So people are asking, what the hell is this comedian here doing here? As Colin said, the Public Records Office, 100 years old. It was established, of course, after the foundation of Northern Ireland. As you said, a lot of records of Ireland were destroyed in the Customs House, or sorry, the Four Courts, I think it was, wasn't it? Four Courts during the Irish Civil War, you know, the IRA destroying evidence. Who knew? Anyway, so the Public Records Office of Northern Ireland basically started with nothing, ladies and gentlemen, and now has improved to over 3 million pieces of archive. My connection with the PR of Proni, very simple. I am a comedian. I do a lot of stuff on BBC Northern Ireland. I'm a comedian that turned on the Christmas tree lights in Larne last year. Career is flying. But as well as being a comedian, I'm a kind of part-time amateur historian, and I've had the very great pleasure of doing a history show with a very good friend of mine, Dr. David Hume of the Orange Order. Dr. David Hume, I first met doing a documentary about Ulster Scots, where I discovered I had Ulster Scots roots, which was quite good, otherwise the documentary would have been screwed. And Dr. Hume, I don't know if you know Dr. Hume, he's very good. He's an Orange man, he's an Orange historian. He's 4'11" and a half, which is why the show is called The Long and the Short of It. And basically, David Hume and I, we have done 7 series of this radio show, The Long and the Short of It, and we take controversial moments of Irish history, we discuss them, we debate them with historians, and then we agree that I'm right. Though being 4'11" and a half, he's an Orange man, he rarely agrees with me, he doesn't give me an inch. Though to be fair, he's very few to give away. Well, anyway, during the course of The Long and the Short of It, 7 series we've done now, I've had the great pleasure of being here in Proni. We've recorded several shows here. We recorded one about the Hearts of Steel, with the documents here from the Hearts of Steel, the 18th century agrarian movement. I've sat with Marie Coleman discussing the Boundary Commission and all the documents that came from the Boundary Commission. And Marie Coleman was like a child in a sweetie shop. The tons of documents that came out from all the people who were making petitions on the Boundary Commission and deciding and arguing about which side of the border they were going to be on. I've also had the great pleasure, and I think I should mention him because I'm an historian, had the great pleasure of working several occasions with Eamon Phoenix in this very building and did interviews with Eamon Phoenix. And I think everybody here will recognize that Eamon Phoenix is one of the best public historians we've ever had. Absolute gentleman. It was a real pleasure to have dealt with him on several series of the long and the short of it. I remember one time we were in Clifton House discussing the great Marie McCracken. And as you know, Eamon liked to talk a bit. The program lasted half an hour. I asked him one question about Marie McCracken. 26.5 minutes later, I asked the second question, can we finish now? So I have been here recording some of the radio shows. I've been here recently as well, recording television versions of the radio show because we've now been commissioned by BBC Northern Ireland for 4 episodes of the long and the short of it, including one about the Siege of Derry, one about the Act of Union, one about the Larne gun running, and one about Michael Collins. And again, Collins mentioned the staff here, and I want to publicly thank, and my producer's not here, and he said, make sure you thank Lindsay Gillespie personally, who has been absolutely superb. And I don't, because when you're making a TV or radio program, you're not quite sure what you want. Lindsay just provided stuff and gave us vital information. This happened recently again. We were in here discussing the Larne gun running and uncovered a document which Marie Coleman prevented me from stealing. And I want to thank her for that because it uncovered stuff that I had never seen before. There was a letter after the Larne gun running of April 1914. UVF, as you know, imported 25,000 arms. There's a letter from the King, well, his representative, writing to Edward Carson, basically saying, you know, in not so many terms, what the fuck do you add? It's not slightly better than that, but it's effectively that. But to have that document, to feel it, to touch it, to have it in your hand, is something, it's just like a connection with history. And that's what I love about this place and about the documents that we have here, because they're so, they connect you properly with real history. I did another documentary with the grandson of Oscar Wilde. We did a documentary about Edward Carson and Oscar Wilde and how Edward Carson had famously destroyed Oscar Wilde in the witness box when Oscar Wilde very unwisely took a case against the Marquis of Queensberry, who accused him of being a sodomite. We were in the National Archives in Kew, and I want to take this as a compliment, by the way. The Public Records Office is a bit like the National Archives at Kew, except not up its own arse. And I genuinely mean that. And the people here are so friendly. They're welcome from the security guys to everybody. At Kew, it was a wee bit different. But the thing is getting your hands on original documents. The documentary was hosted by Merlin Holland, who is Oscar Wilde's grandson, and him getting his hands on the original card that Queensberry had left at the famous club accusing Oscar Wilde of being a sodomite. That was something he got very emotional about. And I see him in Paris when he saw the entry in the original book that was held by the priests in Paris when Oscar Wilde was converted to Catholicism on his deathbed. That's something that really touched him. He then came here, and again, Lindsay was very, very good himself, and Alvin Jackson were looking through documents all about Edward Carson, and he discovered a letter. Merlin Holmes discovered a letter written by I think it was written to Montgomery Hyde, the biographer, and the guy who'd written the letter was actually Merlin Holland's godfather, and he was absolutely touched. And these things are very, very important. The fact that these documents are alive, they're there, they bring history to life, and they are fit. So this place is a treasure trove. It's an absolute mine, a gold mine for historians. And I love coming here, and I hope to come back here. And if anybody from the BBC is here, will you please say that long and the short of it's great and should be repeated and rolled on the television. The Proni have also launching 100 documents, or 100 different documents, just to give a flavor of the stuff that they have here. And they sent me a sort of a list of them, and there's some documents, I just want to pick out 3 or 4 here that I think, you know, are absolutely fascinating. There's a document from 1671 by a lady called Catherine McTimpany during the penal laws, who basically wrote a letter to the authorities, presumably listing everybody who'd gone to mass in Portaferry in 1671. And it's not just wonderful, and not just tell you what we're like. What are we, a nation of touts? We love Titans. It basically listed everybody who went to mass. You know, it's a bit like people did during, lockdown. Six people in their back garden. And that's a trend in Irish history. There's another brilliant document from 1798 called the Black Book of the Rebellion of 1798, listing all the rebels who were involved in the 1798 rebellion. And again, that's a trend in Irish history that you see all during Irish history. These Irish rebel movements were basically infiltrated by informers and touts and spies and all of that in 1798. There was no exception. Basically, what happened in the old days was people would join a secret society, and then they go to a secret meeting of the secret society in a secret location and take a secret oath to keep the secrets of the secret society. And then they'd go to the pub and they go, "You'll never guess where I've just been." Who was there? Write this down. You'll love this. Which is why so many of our Irish rebellions failed. But it's full of all sorts of facts. There's photographs of the Blitz, and there's photographs of the Blitz from 1941. I ended up as a solicitor in 92 High Street, and I remember my uncle telling me this was a site where one of the bombs had landed on the Blitz, and I was there sitting and going, "Oh, the bomb landed here 50 years ago." This is fascinating. So I love. There's also, by the way, there's archive from UTV. I wouldn't like you to look at that. No, it's UTV from 1959. I mean, yeah. So always good to see a young Pamela Valentine. I'm only slagging, she's a mate of mine. No. There are all sorts of documents. There's one as well that I remember that is now released in this part of these 100 documents. It's the original judgment of the European Court of Human Rights for Jeffrey Dudgeon. Jeffrey Dudgeon, who was a man who took a case challenging the illegality of homosexuality in Northern Ireland. 1988, a very, very brave man who stood up against the campaign, as we know, Save Ulster from Sodomy. And look where we are 40 years later, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to Jeffrey Dudgeon. He's a pioneer and a man who deserves to be. And the fact that document is sitting there, and you can look at it and you can say, 1981, homosexuality was illegal in this place, and we were, of course, way behind the rest of the UK. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me. This place is an absolute treasure trove. I hope to be back on many, many occasions. And I would genuinely say to you, from my experience, and I think this is clear from everybody else who say, the staff here are beyond helpful. And I think that makes this a place where I want to come back. And if the BBC are good enough to give me any work, I definitely will be back. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tim. Those excerpts from our UTV archive, the other channel. I have to say, I do welcome our friends from the media, and I do welcome sort of documentary companies and film companies. And I think there is a real symbiotic relationship. So it's great to have a Canadian treat my warm up. I'm now going to do a potted history of Proni in 4.5 minutes. The Proni, as you know, I've heard, was established exactly today, 100 years ago, and we actually have the actual bill right at the very back in that case. This bill even, which was passed through the Senate and is on display today. For reference, Lord Londonderry introduced the bill, and we lots of connection in the personal papers that we have. The bill was signed by A. Thomas Moles, chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. And the reason we celebrate this act is it's still very much in force today. It's a unique piece of legislation because it empowers Proni to take in not just government and public records, but also records deposited by private individuals and organizations, people like you and me. And for the user, that makes Proni a one-stop archive. Now, the reason we have such a wide-ranging remit is because of an event that took place 12 months earlier, in the 30th of June, 1922, and that was the destruction of the PRO of Ireland in Dublin. It was one of the most serious casualties of the Irish Civil War and resulted in the catastrophic loss of 7 centuries of Irish records, including all most pre-1901 census materials, massive gap in our community memory. Now, our first deputy keeper, this man on your right, the DA chart, and his successors made it a personal mission to proactively fill that gap. And so they acquired surrogates for records lost in 1922. Many records that were created by Irish government were then sent on to England. So we were able to recover documents that way. Other documents were transcribed. So when Proni, as Tim said, when Proni was established in 1923, we had nil records, and now have over 3 million treasures dating from 1219 onwards. Now, Chart was relentless in its public appeal for records. He persuaded solicitors, businesses, politicians, churches, the landed aristocracy, and the ordinary man on the street to deposit with Proni. The document you see in front of you is possibly the first document received by Proni. There's a bit of debate about what the first document we received, but this is a good illustration that Chart and Co were thinking beyond the borders in Northern Ireland. This he persuaded a solicitor's firm in Dublin to deposit 3 18th century estate maps of Cookstown, County Tyrone. Who would have known that Cookstown would be so preeminent? On the other side, with official records, probably the biggest, the big game changer was the introduction in 1976 of the 30-year rule. And that was a game changer. It meant that public release records could be released to the public after 30 years. And that has since been superseded by a 20-year rule in 2013. I'm going to finish off with a few comments about our accommodation. For very few of you will have remembered this, but we started off in Murray Street, adjacent to Inst, on the 4th floor in the former linen warehouse, which had no lift. After about 10 years, we decided we wanted a building with a lift, so we moved into the Royal Courts of Justice, which opened in 1933. And we stayed in the Royal Courts of Justice all the way up to 1972, where we survived and we endured the Belfast Blitz. Belfast Telegraph, I think we've got somebody from the Belfast Telegraph here today, recorded that bombs fell near the office, but the only damage recorded was the cracking of some panes of glass with barely a scratch. In 1972, we moved into premises which Tim probably remembers the law courts, he's the Iron Man. But the majority of you will probably remember Proni at Balmoral Avenue. This Balmoral Avenue was a significant building. It was the first new record office to be built in the UK since the PRO in London was erected in 1838. Everybody else is just moving around offices. And I think it's fair to say in Balmoral Avenue, that's where Proni made its reputation as a leading archive of national and international importance, having dramatically expanded its collections, its staff, and its services. And I'm now going to pass over to Heather Stanley, who's going to tell you about the present.
Moving to state-of-the-art archival accommodation in Titanic Quarter in 2011 has been one of our most significant changes for Proni. And when you look around the building today, 12 years later, the high specification of the building remains clear for all to see. And in fact, our state-of-the-art behind the scenes in many ways is the pillar of what we have here, and it's just absolutely tremendous. And as I say, 12 years later, the building is still absolutely magnificent, and we think it's an absolute privilege to be here and to work here and to have this wonderful facility to continue to preserve our archives on into generations to come. In recent years, information retrieval has become an increasingly important element in Proni. And each year we respond to hundreds of requests from individuals, victim support groups, journalists, academics, and legal representatives wishing to access information, often from closed records, closed public records. And the records are closed because they contain information exempt from general release, such as personal or sensitive information about individuals, many which relate to workhouses, asylums, prisons, hospitals, and other organisations. And we have become one of the main evidence providers for applications for redress for historical institutional abuse, and also for troubles legacy requests for information from those trying to find out more information about a conflict-related incident. And you can see some of the legislation which has helped us along the way in terms of making information available to the public. But the growth of information retrieval has coincided with the shift to digital. And in terms of providing this nature of information, we have largely moved away from providing hard copy files to digital scanning of information for release. And that brings me on to all things digital. The lovely footage earlier on showed you the search room in Balmoral Avenue, which I worked in and remembered all very, very well, and worked there for a long number of years. But as you can see, as we have moved into here, and one look at the search room tells you in terms of the digital revolution continues. So whilst the archival collection of traditionally largely paper records continues to increase, and we bring in about 3,000 linear feet of what you would think of as traditional records each year, the majority of records generated by government departments, the wider public sector, or public inquiries such as RHI, are all born digital. And this change has required the development of a digital repository to ensure that born digital records are preserved with integrity for future generations. The Proni electronic catalogue enables searching of the records both on site and online, and key resources are available through our website. Another shift has been in terms of Proni Online, as during the pandemic, the Proni Outreach and Seminar programme was able to continue remotely. And whilst in-person events, as we see today, have thankfully resumed, a range of sessions have continued online remote access, which is continuing to facilitate wider audience engagement and wider and greater inclusivity. And we find that many people who wouldn't generally be able to make it to Proni were able to log on and engage with our remote outreach programme, which has proved to be tremendously beneficial. Just want to talk about a little bit about partnerships and collaboration. Colin mentioned the two in the middle, the major collaborations with the Nerve Centre, National Museum, Linen Hall Library, and the Nerve Centre again in terms of Making the Future and Collab Archive. But two of our key, I just want to highlight two of the key partnerships in recent years, one of which has been the working with the Virtual Record Treasury of Ireland, with a group of major archival institutions and organisations: Trinity College Dublin, National Archives of Ireland, National Archives UK, Royal Irish Academy, and of course ourselves. And The aim of the project was to recreate virtually. You all saw the images there of the loss of the records in 1922 in the Four Courts. So the Virtual Record Treasury of Ireland set out to virtually recreate the records that were held in the Four Courts. And as Stephen had said, part of our sort of early acquisition policy was to try and create the surrogate material and to collect material perhaps which had been lost relating to Northern Ireland, which was held in the Four Courts. What that means is that we have been able to make a major contribution to the Virtual Record Treasury of Ireland because we do hold a lot of material which provides reference to material which was lost in that catastrophic fire in 1922. The other major project I want to emphasise is the UTV archive and Northern Ireland Screener collaboration with those two organisations. And the footage which provides, the UTV archive provides sort of unique footage of Northern Ireland life really from the late 50s right up to the present day. And the clips of which are playing a major part in our sort of online outreach and basically our outreach programs. And you saw the clips that we're able to use today. And that is proving tremendously popular. Just finally, for myself, I want to mention archive accreditation. We were the first accredited archive in the Northern Ireland, and it represents the hallmark of excellence in the archive sector. It was first awarded on the 10th of July 2018, and it was a tremendous accolade and a sort of a validation of everything that we have been doing the past number of years here, and it was a tremendous privilege and a great achievement by all the staff actually to receive that nationally recognised award of validation of the work that we actually do. And that was a tremendous achievement. So sorry if that's been a sort of a whistle-top tour of the present. And I hand you over to David, who's going to continue a little bit, look into the crystal ball and see what's coming up in the future.
I just got the one slide. I will talk to that and try to stay on focus. So it's beyond 2023, beyond this year. It was almost, I was going to paraphrase like Buzz Lightyear, to infinity and beyond, to the future and beyond. Thanks to Heather, our head of preservation, and Stephen, head of public services, for that very quick canter really through the past and up to the present day. So as you've been hearing, Proni has been a custodian for 100 years with responsibility for protecting and keeping archives in good condition and making them available. This is in line with the role of national and regional archives across the world. Being a good custodian has remained Proni's fundamental purpose for the past century against a backdrop of huge societal changes. This has required a process of continual evolution to meet the needs and expectations of researchers, public record bodies, and private depositors. We need to evolve to remain relevant and position ourselves to be even more relevant in the future. So in the short term, we are developing a new strategy, a new strategic vision that reflects Proni's current context, but also looks to the future, combining our archival responsibilities, whilst also being more entrepreneurial and getting the message out that archives are for everyone. The new strategy will need to reflect how technology can help us deliver more effectively and efficiently, but remain alive to the fact that this same technology is a constant challenge in terms of record keeping and digital preservation. Artificial intelligence, stories about it seem to be everywhere. It's constantly in the news. It's either being presented as a massive opportunity or the sort of greatest threat to civilization that we know, or some sort of a combination of both. And archives have been at the forefront in terms of machine learning and harnessing benefits in relation to the transcription and sensitivity and review of records. So it does provide an opportunity. So that new technologies may be able to transform what we do, but we need to be able to understand their limitations in terms of custodianship and to ensure ethical frameworks are in place to protect personal sensitive information as well. So the ever-growing volume of data, which is growing exponentially, the terabytes of digital data that we have, will require new archive skills new archivist roles over the next 5, 10, 100 years. I want to just turn to our recent past, and it's been mentioned already. The legacy of the conflict and the traumatic impact of historical abuse will continue to form a critical part of our work. We are aware of the transgenerational effects caused by conflict and trauma, and the ongoing search by victims and survivors to access information. The importance of providing access to information for families and individuals will remain a priority for the office. The recently appointed Truth Recovery Panel and the forthcoming public inquiry into mother and baby institutions, Magdalene laundries and workhouses will consider future provision of access to records for victims and survivors, and both Proni and the department will have an important role to play in that work. I think linked to this area of work and an important aspect of good custodianship is education and engagement. Archives, as you've been hearing, can help us to think critically, evaluate evidence, and give an understanding of the other, looking beyond ourselves. These remain important skills for students across all levels of education. Underpinning our work through the 21st century must be increased levels of sustainability. Proni will be storing, as I've said, huge amounts of data and physical records. This will have an adverse environmental impact, and we need to identify approaches to reduce the negative consequences for our climate. So as I finish my reflections on the future, Proni, can I say that these speaking notes have not been prepared with the help of AI tools such as ChatGPT. I did look at what they might have provided, and I was reasonably happy actually in terms of what I prepared. But in the era of fake news and misinformation, Proni will have an even more important role to play as a custodian of truth and a protector of trust. We will continue to hold archives for everyone, both for now and for future generations, that will reflect a more diverse and inclusive community. And I firmly believe in the future, I think there'll be an even greater thrill to hold a piece of history in your hand, an original document. Tim's made that point really well, really effectively. Proni will develop its work with a diverse range of stakeholders, including cultural, arts, heritage, community, commercial, and academic partners. And Proni will be a good custodian addressing the challenges of digital archiving and acting as an enabler across government and our society. So that's my view of the future. Thank you very much. I'm Marie Coleman.
Okay, so I have this somewhat challenging task of trying to explain to you how we brought more than 3 million records down to 100 treasures for our centenary. I will caveat this by saying there's not one person that has seen all 3 million records that are in our stores. So this is really just, we came together to try to give everyone a flavour of the sort of records that are here and the different things that you can do in Proni. And we started that off with staff suggestions. Obviously our staff see our records every single day. Different things speak to different people. And after that, we had more than 300, which was a lot better than 3 million, but still quite a lot to get down to 100. So we started to think about what do we think is significant in our collections. Would we look at the oldest document, the youngest document, our first acquisition, our most recent acquisition, the largest thing we have in here, the smallest thing we have in here? Is that the way to go? What's interesting, quirky, unique? But mainly we wanted to make sure that the records were representative of Proni, of the people who use us and what can be found here, and also representative of all of the communities in Northern Ireland. So we did go with the oldest. I'm just going to show you a few of them. I would love to show you all 100, but we would be here till tonight. So just a few. We did go with our oldest, which is a papal bull from 1219. However, this record did originate in Scotland. So we also have what we believe is our oldest Irish record in the 100 treasures as well. We did go right up to the most modern things that we have in here. So this was mentioned earlier, our Stay Home Memories project that we did during COVID. So we have one of our Stay Home census forms that was submitted during that project as part of the 100 treasures. And speaking of new technology and the future, our recent Collab Archive program created podcasts, which are now part of the archive. That's the most recent thing that we have created here in Proni, and it is on the 100 treasures as well. This is something that we do believe may be the largest document in Proni, not that you can tell from this little picture on the screen. And this document can only be viewed if it's rolled out on the floor. It's too big for all the tables. It has been meticulously digitized in pieces and stitched together so that we have one digital image of it. But we love it as well because it is a genealogy document. And that's what most people come here to use us for. So that is on our treasures as well. This is a very early plan of Belfast from 1790. And seeing as we're sitting here in Belfast at the minute, that had to go into our treasures too. And then finally, there's just some nice quirky things. This is a threatening letter to the Marquis of Lavercorn about his beard and how he was trying to lure the women away with his beard. And it was written by some of his tenants to him. This is a letter from a man in Seattle to the Lord Mayor of Belfast seeking a wife. So before there was Tinder, before there was anything else, just write to the mayor and say, I would really like an Irish wife. Could you please find me one? So things like this appear on our treasures list as well. Just things that we have come across over the years as staff that we think are just amazing that they're still here and we can still look at them and still engage with them. But this is just a little look at those 100 documents and whereabouts in Northern Ireland they have originated from. Because Proni at 100, it's very important that we are an archive for everyone. So we are the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland. We are here for everyone and we want to be representative of everyone. So while here in Proni as staff, we have pulled together this list of 100 treasure documents that we love, that we've come across, that we think are amazing. What we do want to be doing over our centenary period is hearing from the people who use us every day, because everyone will have a different idea of what a treasure document is for them. So the full 100 will be released across our social media sites over the next few months. So if you don't already, follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on all three if you have them. And you'll see all of the documents shared as we go along. But what we really want people to do is tell us stories back as well. So tell us about a document that you treasure from Proni that you've used, that's maybe broken down a wall for you, showing you something that you didn't know before. We're well aware that everybody would have a different opinion about what is a treasure document from Proni, and we really want to know what our users think about us at 100. So keep an eye out for the full 100 list over the next few months, and please do share back with us anything that you think is a treasure as well. I'm now going to hand over to Rhona from Ancestry, who is going to show us a birthday present essentially that we've been given from Ancestry. So give me 2 wee seconds to swap these PowerPoints over and then we'll hear from Rhona.
Thank you, Lindsay. My name is Rhona Murray and I've been with Ancestry about 12 years now. I'm excited to be here today to participate in the centenary events for Proni 100. As Lindsay touched on, Ancestry have been working hard in the background to create a birthday present, for want of a better description, for the centenary event. And I'm going to talk to you about it today and how you can access that. So the valuation revision books have just recently launched on Ancestry. And those who are interested in family history and local history will be familiar with the documents, having been already online on the Proni website. But what I'm excited to announce today is that this collection is now searchable like never before. And so for the first time ever, you can actually go in and search every single name in the collection. So we have created an index to over 3.2 million names, and Proni has over 3 million records. So that's one name for every record in the store, which is actually quite nice. The images and indexes have just launched on Ancestry and they are available for free. Conscious of the access sort of principles and morals that Proni have, Ancestry have launched those records for free as well. All you need to do is register with a free registered guest account, which requires an email and a password, but you will not need to pay any. And conscious that, you know, Proni has done a significant amount of work on the collection already, creating the digital images and also making them available first search by place name, but we're excited to sort of build on that and create additional momentum behind that. And I'll talk you through how to access it. So those who are following along online might actually like to open up a new tab in their web browser and go to ancestry.co.uk. If you are a member already, you can sign in, but if not, you can click on search, go into the card catalogue, and then you'll see the most recently launched collections. And at the top, we'll see the valuation revision box. So we've got 3,193,180 names in there, first accessible for the first time through digital search. If you come back to it later and the records say in a few months and you want to find it and it's no longer showing by date added, you can pop in a keyword search in the top left for valuation, and you'll be able to pull up the collection that way as well. So just to talk you through what it is that you can do, I'll show you the search form. So you can search by first name, last name, the year that your ancestor might appear in the documents, but we've maintained the ability to search by place as well. So for those who have already established locations within your family tree, you can go in and search by the electoral district, the union, and whatnot. You can also filter by resident or else property owner if you'd like to, depending on who you're looking for within your research. It's probably worth emphasizing, and it has been touched on already actually throughout previous speakers, that this collection is all the more valuable because of the loss of the pre-1901 census records. Dare I admit that my great-granduncle was in the forecourts that day, so I feel like I'm like making up for maybe his actions in trying to maybe create more accessibility to these records. And although they are annual notations on the value of property and land across the 6 counties of Ireland, you can use them as census substitutes in that way. So once you enter in one of your family members' details, or even try a surname, you'll get through to what we call a free registered guest account sign up. So you can just enter your email address here, you won't face any paywall, and then you'll be able to move on with the searches. So I've pulled up just an example search to help you see what it is within the collection that you can find. And I just put in Smith, and I was really pleasantly surprised to actually find that the first 3 results were for a lady. And if we think back to documents 100 years ago, or in this case slightly less, it's for 1935, we're typically finding males within our collections. And so to be able to see females represented, although I would imagine few and far between, I'm excited to see what other females might be represented within the collection. And just something to note as well, some of the names are written more in shorthand rather than in full. So you can see down towards the bottom of the list, we see WM instead of Williams. So as you're searching, maybe play around with the names and the variations there to get into the documents and find your ancestors. So picking up on Anna Smith as an example, we can see that she's a resident in 1935 in Ballymacreely and in County Down. And you can click through and click through and view the image as well on Ancestry. And we have a number of features that enable you to zoom in, zoom out, even sort of turn it to the negative if that would help you read the penmanship in a better way. But interestingly for this one, Anna Smith is actually recorded over Sam Smith. And so these documents might help you pinpoint events in your family tree that might pertain to, is that her father or is that her husband? Is she now a widow? And you kind of do additional research around the individual to find out, are we seeing maybe a notice, is that sort of relating back to a death event for Sam Smith? Is it migration or whatnot? And so the records themselves, because they're done annually, can help you sort of, hone in on major events within your family tree and build out from a different source that you might not have expected to find within a land record. If you want to as well, you can also browse the collection. So going back to the search form, if you head to the right-hand side, you can browse the collection, filter by county, filter by the electoral district, and then go into each individual book accordingly to that area. And you can literally click image by image if you prefer to access the documents in that way. That brings me to the end of this whistle stop tour to just share with you like this sort of monumental moment of launching the 3.2 million names, but we could not have done this without the underlying work of Proni and the previous digitization of the creation of those digital images. We'll be launching more records for Northern Ireland over the centenary period, and I'm very pleased to say that they will be freely available on Ancestry as well. So that brings me to the end. I'm going to just briefly introduce Stephen Walker and hand over to him.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stephen Walker. I was with the BBC for 34 years, but I have now been released into the community. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about my experience of Proni. And then we have some esteemed guests here who are going to tell me about their experiences. And do you guys want to sit up first? So Rhona and Tim and Sam. You don't need your sunglasses for Sam's shirt. Not me, not guilty. It's only fair because my phone went off when Tim went off. So there we are. There's karma for you. So I've come here in the past wearing two hats, a BBC hat and as an author in a private capacity. I've written 3 books, 2 relating to the First World War and 1 relating to the Second World War. And I've got a 4th book coming out in the autumn. The first thing I would say about this place is obviously the staff. The staff are absolutely fantastic, and I think you'd all agree, those of you that come here regularly. You know, no request is ever sort of ignored, and people go beyond the call of duty, and I think that is the best thing about this place, and that is the fact that we are constantly made welcome, you know, people really do go the extra mile. The other thing I'd like to say about this place is I absolutely adore the building. The building is absolutely fantastic. I adore the building, but I hate the parking. The parking is an absolute nightmare. And the parking can make it quite expensive research, as I have found out when I realized that I haven't put enough money in. So I have returned to find all kinds of things happening. But buildings do matter. And this is a good building. Bad buildings do the opposite. And there is a wow factor about this building, and there is a feel-good factor about this building. And the very fact when you come in to the big atrium and you see that John Hewitt famous poem, and I think that is tremendously welcoming. I love the rooms upstairs. I love the fact when the files arrive and it feels like Christmas. I know Tim has already made reference to Marie Coleman getting very excited. I can understand that when the files arrive and you think, gosh, maybe there's a story in here, or maybe there's a good quote in here. And then we get to open the files and have a look at the files. And the security staff are up there, and we're all with our little pencils. We're not allowed our pens because we color in old cabinet records. And I do feel sometimes up there that I'm resitting my O-levels as the security guards walk around, and I half expect them to say, you have 1 hour, turn your papers over now, you know, no conferring, no cheating. So those are the rooms upstairs. And of course, I've also had the privilege of going and seeing the vaults, which are vaults and which are very exciting. And I think it's really important what Tim had to say about Eamon Phoenix, because very often I would come here if I was doing a piece for Good Morning Ulster, or I was doing a piece for Newsline, Eamon Phoenix would be here. And what a national treasure Eamon Phoenix was. And we miss him terribly.
And I can relate exactly. Tim has, as usual, pinched all my lines already. So next time, have him on last, would you guys? Because Eamon Phoenix could talk for Ireland and Britain and France and Germany. And you would just ask him a question about Merlin Rees or Brian Faulkner or Jerry Adams or Martin McGuinness. And away he goes. And I could have listened to him all day. And very often I did listen to him. So I came here privately to research matters about the First and the Second World War. And as I say, it is really exciting discovering something, discovering a quote. And I remember going to Balmoral Avenue and I wanted to look at some of the personal papers relating to Major General Oliver Nugent, who was the commanding officer of the 36th Ulster Division. I was writing a book called Forgotten Soldiers, The Irishman Shot at Dawn, still available in some good bookshops. And we went through his papers and we came across a letter that he had written to his wife, basically bitching about his colleagues. And he said, and this is the quote, "I don't think they are fit for service. I should be very sorry to have to trust them. It is all due to putting a weak man in command of the brigade to start with and giving commissions to men of the wrong class." Wow. Wow. And you know, there's the journalist thinking, right, we've got a great quote there. Now that quote is over a century old, but it still makes me go ouch. Never mind, you know, the X factor, you know, the archives can produce the ouch factor. And that quote was so good that obviously it had to go in the book, because that, in a sense, because it was a private letter, those were his private feelings, but that gave a sense of what he was feeling with the way that he and his soldiers were behaving. So that's my experience of Proni, and there'll be a chance later on to ask the panelists their thoughts. But let's start. Maybe Rhona, would you sort of introduce yourself and tell us what your experience is?
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. My name is Rhona McAtasney. I am a bit of a Proni poster child. I think Lindsay reads me out for every occasion, and I'm very happy to do that. I'm going to give a brief kind of outline of my Proni story. It all started with a diary. About 11 years ago, my sister and I found my diary from 1981 in a drawer in her home next to mine, just outside Newry. And it was my diary from when I was 13 in 1981. And it was full of the usual dramas of teenage life. So boys, school, top of the pops, family rows. And increasingly over time, as we got into reading it together and having a good laugh about it, the Troubles, and specifically the 1981 hunger strike campaign, which started in April of that year. And my diary was a reflection, as all teenage diaries are, I guess, of the enormity of the outside world was nothing compared to the enormity of me chasing a boy around Woolies, nabbing him at the pick and mix. So, but as a Twitter fan then, and less so now maybe, but I'd see diary accounts on that media platform, and I thought it might be a fun thing to do to create my own account, and with daily entries from that diary, heavily edited, alongside 6 years of the top 20 charts that I scribbled down from Gary Davis on Radio 1 during the 80s, alongside my own personal rankings. And that became Northern Ireland Girl 1981, which was a Twitter account that took on a life of its own, way beyond my expectations. Then I worked in admin in the hospice in Newry, but I increasingly became the diary woman, which was a very weird handle, but people would come and tell me their stories of their diaries. And I realized, like, from being a fun thing to do, that this was actually not to like sound pompous or anything, but an important thing to do, to recognize not just diaries, not just personal stories, but personal stories of women and personal stories of women in Northern Ireland, because God knows in the realms of history, we are vastly underrated and unheard. So the profile of the account increased. This is not a story of Twitter, by the way, would you get there? But newspaper articles, radio interviews, and more followers, culminating in there's been a song written about it, which is very bizarre. But Lindsay got in touch, and from there, Lindsay, as is her wont, decided that she was going to make it her mission to get the diary into Proni. And especially when she found out that she and I had the same birthday, that was the turning point, wasn't it? We had to be friends and colleagues and whatever. So my first foray into working in Proni was with a project called In Her Words, which was a beautiful exhibit of women's letters and diaries from inside Proni, unseen, unheard, unrecognised, really, stories of women who'd written to their bosses in the mills, of women who'd emigrated, and somehow mine was in there too. It was a gorgeous exhibition that was on in here, and then went around the country and put me in touch with all kinds of people who wanted to tell their stories too. So to that point, honestly, I'd never been in this building. I didn't know that much about Proni. I certainly didn't think it was for me, which is a battle that Proni has fought immensely to change that opinion among people. But so now not only was I a depositor, but I was also part of a story, and that story was going to keep growing. The story of the stories of us, of the people of Northern Ireland. And I fell in love with it. I really fell in love with this place and the people who work here, as everybody else has said, and the women's voices that are in here. So I started to volunteer for projects, and then I started to help design projects, culminating in work with Making the Future and the Nerve Centre and Proni. Myself, Lindsay, and Dr. Laura Greer, who isn't here today, created a project called Dear Diary, and that was an amazing point, wasn't it? So we invited 17 women into Proni. Lindsay randomly assigned them diaries or letters that became their woman, so to speak, and every volunteer researched their woman. They went to houses, they went to graves, they dug in the records, they found all kinds of things, and this culminated in a website that is a timeline of diaries where you can go in, click on March, and read a diary from 1798, read a diary from one of the Dufferin women who were Northern Ireland's Downton Abbey set, effectively, and read a diary from and drawings of Eva Gore Booth, who sketched W.B. Yeats in her diary, which is in here. Isn't that amazing? So, and then mine in there too. But we created this timeline that you can go in and click, so you can hear the words of Roberta Hewitt, who's come to take a life on of her own outside of John, to be like a woman of standing of her own, and a woman with opinions and thoughts, and her diaries are wonderful. I took part in the project. I was assigned a woman called Una Giaconata Haldane, who was from Antrim Road, ended up living under Mussolini's rule in Milan. Started off her diary giving off about not being able to get decent tea and how her perm was out of control, and ended her diary smuggling British servicemen across the Alps to safety after Mussolini opened the prison camps and set them all free, knowing that Italy was about to fall. I mean, that's a story, that's a journey, and she's here in here. And I fell in love with her. She's my favorite thing. Not only is she here, but there are letters from the servicemen whose lives she saved in here. Remarkable. Did you know? I did not know. So we did that, and now I am a fully invested Proni person. I'm in love with the stories, I'm in love with the building, I'm in love with the people, I'm in love with the voices of Northern Ireland that we hear. My Proni story doesn't end there, because all of this compelled me to quit my admin life. And I wrote at Queen's, where under the tutelage of this woman, I obtained, to a certain extent, I obtained a master's in public history. So now I'm not an admin person anymore, I'm a public historian. Now I work for Northern Ireland Screen's digital film archive and heritage and education. I'm the access and outreach officer. I can't believe, I say that out loud, I still can't believe that's my role. I researched the UTV archives for 2 years with Proni. So, full circle, literally my life is full circle around Proni. I've catalogued UTV film archives. I've seen Charlie Witherspoon in every graveyard in Northern Ireland telling a strange tale. Which are wonderful, wonderful. So here we are, a diary in a drawer, Twitter, a depositor, a volunteer, a collaborator, and now a colleague and a partner, and I might cry. I find my passion in this place with these people, what it holds, and the stories that are in here are incredible. And what Proni have done to bring them out to the people of Northern Ireland is also incredible. I am incredibly lucky, but I just think it goes to show what can happen when you get involved in this amazing, amazing place. So that's my story.
Well, thank you very much. You, Marie, wouldn't mind just introducing yourself?
My name is Marie Coleman. I'm Professor of 20th Century Irish History at Queen's. So in my life as a researcher and teacher, I use this institution. I send my students here. Did we bring your class on a tour, Bronagh? Yeah, we did. I was thinking we were back to that for the first time in person earlier this year. So that was nice. I was thinking though, the month of June and Public Records Office and what a mixed bag that is. This time last year we were mourning the death of the old Irish Public Record Office, the centenary of that. We were marking that, and I suppose it's a centenary of rebirth this time. It's the new Public Record Office which opened here in Northern Ireland, and I was reflecting even on that term Public Record Office, which is a term which has gone out of fashion and has been replaced, say, in the UK and in Dublin by National Archives. But Proni has retained the Public Record Office title, but in some ways it hides what Proni is, because National Archives and Public Record Offices do tend to be just solely the custodian of state papers. The hybrid nature of Proni has been mentioned here, but I think that really has to be the visionaries who drew up that legislation, and I'm not sure there were too many visionaries drawing up legislation in Northern Ireland 100 years ago, but to open Proni beyond that remit of just being the state paper office, if you like, to be the repository, the place to deposit records relating to Ulster. And it is not just the 6 counties, it is more broadly Ulster, and it's even beyond. There's even papers from my research interest in Longford, so Longford gets a look in there. So I think that was one of the main points I wanted to raise, was that just how unique Proni is in being the custodian of the state papers, but also all of these records. To focus though first on the state papers, and it is, we can't underestimate how important Proni is as the custodian of records, initially of the old Stormont government, then the period of direct rule, and now more recently the period post Good Friday Agreement. And to go back to the 100 treasures, we were sent we got a sneak preview of the documents, and I have to say, as I suppose a political historian and someone who looks at the state papers with Sam, one that stood out to me was a document which was used to brief secretaries of state for Northern Ireland in the mid-1980s on expressions to be avoided and notes on other terminology. Geographical areas, UK, GB. UK is a political expression. Great Britain is a geographical term underlined. NI people put considerable store by the proper use of the two terms. Other terms, mainland, underlined, unacceptable. Across the water, a local term which refers to Great Britain. British Isles, a geographical term including the UK and the Republic, but not popular in the Republic. These islands, a way of avoiding the problem above. Then Northern Ireland has 5 different descriptions other than Northern Ireland. Ulster, best avoided. The 6 counties, avoided. The north of Ireland, ditto. The north, an acceptable colloquialism used by both communities. The province, not strictly accurate, but acceptable. So I think that's my favourite, which I think it links into my own interests. But and of course, we're moving now. Sam and myself have been working on the state papers and released proposed Good Friday Agreement, and keep an eye out for an event coming in September when we've the latest release coming up. So Proni does fulfil that basic remit of being the custodian of state papers very well. But the other type of papers it holds, just to mention two categories which I would be familiar with. One are the land and estate records. And I don't think anyone will mind if I mention the work of Anthony Malcolmson when he was in the record office in driving around and basically making sure when these big houses closed down, everything didn't go on a skip and it went to the boot of Anthony's car and came back here. But I remember one of my former PhD students, Neil Watt, who now works in, I think he's in Manchester, he's with the National Trust, and he was working on women of the big houses and marriage. And he was very excited one day because he found Countess Markovich's marriage settlement in the Gore booth of the Citadel papers. And of course, Markovich at the time, it was a mixed marriage because she was marrying a Catholic. And there are some very interesting views on mixed marriage, which might not fit exactly with the view we have of the Republican Countess Markovich of later years. But also business records. I think business records were were hinted at there. Proni has massive business records, I think mostly relating to the linen industry, but where business records came into the event where I managed to stop Tim McGarry making off with Lord Stanfordham's letter berating Edward Carson for his role in the gun running. But Tim and myself also did an episode of the radio episode of The Long and the Short of It, where we looked at these were the suites in the sweet shop, the papers of John Henry Collins, solicitors in Newry, because John Henry Collins was also a nationalist MP, your part of the world. They collected views of people in border areas, mainly from the nationalist side, on what they wanted the Boundary Commission in 1925 to do. And that's some very interesting views there. But of course, this being in Northern Ireland, if you have the papers of one lot, you have to have something from the other lot as well. And Proni holds a very valuable archive of the Ulster Unionist Council, accepting that first page. If anyone knows what the first page of the Covenant is, talk to these people. They'd like to have it to add to their collection. So in 2 or 3 years' time, when we come up to the centenary of the Boundary Commission, we have two very good collections there of views of what people who are going to be affected if this boundary changed. So there's an idea for an exhibition 2 years down the line. The survey, the business records though owe a lot, and again, I don't think anyone will mind if I single out the late Brian Traynor from his time in the Public Record Office. Brian's work with the survey of business records was hugely important for here, but he was also seconded to help survey business records in Drogheda and Dundalk, which is very important for later work by the Irish National Archives. And I have a slight personal interest in this because his first assistant on the survey of business records was my mother-in-law, who was then working in the UCD library. But Brian started that work in 1968. And my mother-in-law talks about the two of them would get into Brian's car and they would literally drive around all these solicitors and places who were likely to close down and say, well, can we have your records? And a bit like Anthony with his landed records, they went into the boot of Brian's car and they came up to Proni. But I was interested by the timing of that, because this was 1968, just as, and it was a collaboration between the then Public Record Office in Dublin and Proni. And I think that cross-border cooperation between the two national archives, the two inheritors of the old Irish Public Record Office, was hugely important. And it kept going through the 70s when that sort of anything cross-border, even driving across the border, wasn't easy going. And we saw the culmination of it in that tripartite alliance between Proni, TNA in London and the National Archives in Dublin with Beyond 2022. So I think to draw all this to a close, because I'm probably going over time here, I think Proni has more than fulfilled its remit of providing, as the legislation said, for the reception and preservation of public records appertaining to Northern Ireland. But its significance goes far beyond that. Proni holds records which we go back to 1219, so long predates its own establishment. It's dedicated to preserving records which would otherwise have been lost. We see increasingly, maybe Proni might have started off as being more reflective of the strength of unionism at the start of Northern Ireland, but it has definitely expanded to being much more representative of all cross-community records. There's a strong cross-border element to its work. And it also reflects the changing nature of Northern Irish society with things like the Northern Ireland Gay Rights Association records are here, and this being Pride Month, I think it's important to mention sources like that. But I'll leave on one note, and I think if anyone sees David Huddleston running away from me at lunchtime, it's because he knows I'm going to ask him when am I going to get access to the Ulster Special Constabulary records. This is a plea to the Permanent Secretary. When you go back to the office, can you look down the side of the couch, see if there's a few bob down there, because Proni needs more money. Proni needs to be well funded to keep doing for the next century the great work it has done for the past 100 years.
Marie, thanks very much indeed. You talked there about the papers and Sam McBride, who sit beside you. Sam, you're here quite a lot. Tell us briefly about your experience.
Yes, hello everybody, good afternoon. I'm Tim McGarry from the Belfast Telegraph and Sunday Independent. And I should start by first of all apologising to Tim's eyes for having offended them with my choice of shirt. And also say that Marie is demonstrating admirable optimism in asking the Permanent Secretary for more money right now, given what is going on right now. But yes, I think that when I was looking through yesterday, quite late yesterday, the list of 100 documents that we had been sent, I was struck by the fact that there can't really be anywhere else in the world where it's possible to have in your hands a papal bull from the 13th century, a contemporaneous account of the Battle of the Boyne in handwriting, and the Northern Ireland Office files for what would happen during the Cold War if a missile with a nuclear warhead was to detonate over Belfast. What would happen in terms of who would be killed, and then what would happen to those of us who were either fortunate or unfortunate enough to survive, how we'd be fed, what our government would be, all of those sorts of things. It's really a remarkable sweep of both ancient history in some ways and current history right up to the present day. Lots of what's in this archive, by its very nature, by being an Irish archive, by being a Northern Irish archive, is inherently depressing. The history of this island is filled with very negative events: slaughter, sectarianism, destruction of property and of people's livelihoods. And that is something which, when I come here to do the archives with Marie, and as it was with the much lamented Eamon, who has been rightly remembered today, that was often there. It was about the Troubles, it was about what was going on during that period of our history. But when I was trying to think of a single document that I recall and that I love, or that made a big impression on me, I really couldn't come up with anything. I've gone through probably tens of thousands of pages of documents here over whatever number of years I've been coming here. Lots of very interesting stories, quirky stuff, historically significant stuff, shocking stuff, quite revelatory stuff about people who are still politicians today, etc., etc. But it was really difficult, and I went back through some of what I've written. I couldn't think of anything, and then it struck me, and it's not something which we now have, because we're now up to about the year 2000 with these records. So it's very much into what is recent history, almost to some people perhaps almost current affairs with a bit of a lag to it. But for many years, the two people whose memos that when I saw them in the files, I always wanted to read, and I always wanted to read every word of them, were Sir Ken Bloomfield, the former head of the civil service, and Maurice Hayes, a very significant senior civil servant during much of the Troubles. And they were two very different people in many ways. One was a Protestant, a unionist, somebody who felt he was very British, one who, and a very classic British civil servant, if you like. One was a Catholic, he was very much Irish, he was nationalist in his outlook, he enjoyed Gaelic games. And yet, in the midst of the worst of what happened in this place, you see in those documents how they tried to keep things together, how they tried to keep society functioning, tried to keep basic public services functioning, and tried to explain to directorial ministers who often, through no fault of theirs, to be perfectly honest about it, had very limited understanding of this place when they were suddenly sent here to try to deal with a really impossible situation, trying to explain to them the consequences of potential actions that they might take and how they would be perceived. And it's really not just what they wrote, but it's how they wrote it They had wonderful eloquence, wonderful flair. They wrote much better than most journalists write, than most authors write. These were really educated people and really thoughtful people, exactly the sort of people that you would want in that sort of situation. And so I think that as we look at what's in this building, it is possible, I think, sometimes for people to look at this and think, you know what, government is about roads, it's about hospitals, it's about schools, it's about all the basic infrastructure that helps us to live our lives. And of course that is true, but there is something intangible in an archive that speaks to something much, much deeper about our history recently and in the past. And the final very brief thing I'll say is that Rhona said rightly that it's difficult for some people to engage with this. It doesn't feel relevant to them. It seems dusty, all the rest of it. And that's true. And it's good that Proni are trying to reach out, but I don't think you should ever be too discouraged about certain people not maybe immediately grasping the significance of these things. I remember my mum when I was 10 or 12 or something of that age category, getting very into family history, tracing our family tree, and I wasn't interested. And she said to me, look, one day you'll be interested in this. I wasn't interested when I was your age. And just recently, I've stumbled across a few things in here that relate to my family, and I'm very interested in them. So that means I'm getting old, but I'm also give up. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much indeed. And finally, Tim, I know you've given us glimpse of what you've been doing before, but is there anything else off the way?
I just want to say one of the things, I think it's come across every single one of the four speakers here, is that they're so enthusiastic about this place that you lose a sense of time. Because we try to speak for 5 fucking minutes. But I think that says something about this place. I mean, it is, you do lose yourself in here. The records are fascinating. And Sam suggests there's a lot. You can get the best by Northern Ireland politics. One of my favourite quotes, William Butler Yeats about Irish history, says that being Irish, he had an abiding sense of tragedy, which sustained him through temporary periods of joy. But our Irish history is fascinating, and here is one of the treasure troves, and it's one of the places that we should learn and treasure and enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim, but I think some questions. So, do we have any questions? You're all really shy. I mean, you're not all shy in real life. You're only just pretending to be shy. Surely somebody has a question for any of our panelists? No? Okay. In which case, I'm going to ask you all a very quick question, very tricky. We talk about opening up the archives, and we talk about making it clear that these are not just public records. Anything you would like Proni to do or consider to try and reach that goal of opening the archives up? Rhona?
I'm going to say, as a rural woman, that I would like to see Proni and everything that it does get out of Belfast. And I think during lockdown, that was really, really successful and opened Proni to people who would never venture to Belfast, who would never get into this building. Not just rural people as such, but people with disabilities, women, in homes that are too busy to get down to Belfast. And I think the more and more and more take Proni out on the road and show it off to its best to all the people who live here.
Marie?
I'd agree with that, and I think the way to do it is with the start that's being made of digitisation. It was starting, I mean, I have handed to Proni, the digitisation of the Ulster Covenant was one of the first projects that any archives here had digitised. Our students, you can imagine what it was like trying to do an MA in 2020 when all the archives were closed. Our students got through because so much had been digitised to that point, and since 2020, there's been much more. So I think to continue on that route of digitisation, that is what makes it accessible. It also stops, researchers outside Ireland can access the stuff, and that's a huge benefit as well.
Sam?
Yeah, I thoroughly agree with trying to not just get stuff into a digital format, a searchable format, and that's very important increasingly. And I'm with the generation, I suppose, that grew up with the internet, but the generation coming after me and the one after that, they expect to have stuff that they can search. They expect to be able to go to a chatbot and get answers to questions, etc. And so therefore, it's not just for people coming into this building, as amazing as it is to hold something in your hand, and actually it helps to preserve it if you don't hold it in your hand. So yes, that's
Tim, a brief and final word.
Decent car park, because if this was going anymore, get a £45 fine.
Ladies and gentlemen, maybe you give a hand to our panel.